Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a thriving civilization. The buildings are tall, the systems are working, people are free, everything looks stable. But beneath the surface, something is shifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Values are changing, priorities are drifting, discipline is fading. And here's the uncomfortable truth. By the time most people realise what's happening, it's already too late. Because over 2,000 years ago, Plato mapped out this exact process. Not as a guess, not as a theory, but as a pattern. And by the end of this episode, you're going to see why this pattern might not just explain the past, but predict what's about to come. In the Republic, Plato does something most people overlook. He doesn't just describe a perfect society. He describes how it breaks, step by step. And the key insight is that societies don't collapse because of external enemies. They collapse because of internal shifts in values. Think of a society like a human mind. When your mind is clear, disciplined and focused, you make good decisions. But when it becomes distracted, impulsive, driven by short-term pleasure, your life begins to destabilize. Plato's idea is simple but powerful. What happens within individuals eventually scales into society. So this isn't just political, it's psychological. The cycle begins with aristocracy, Plato's ideal. Not aristocracy as we think of it today, but rule by the best. The most rational, the most disciplined, the most truth-oriented individuals, philosopher kings. People who don't want power but accept it as a responsibility. Imagine a ship crossing the ocean. Would you want it steered by someone chasing popularity or someone who actually understands navigation? That's Plato's point. In this stage, reason is in control. Society is structured, balanced and stable. But here's the flaw. It relies on something incredibly fragile. The next generation being just as disciplined as the last. And that almost never happens. Over time, aristocracy decays into timocracy. This is where things subtly shift. Wisdom is no longer the highest value. Honour is. Status, reputation, strength. Think of a society like Sparta. Discipline is still there, but it's no longer about truth. It's about image, power, recognition. Here's a thought experiment. You have two leaders. One quietly makes the right decisions, even if no one notices. The other constantly proves their strength, demands respect, and builds a powerful image. In a timocratic society, which one rises? Exactly, and this is where the first crack appears. Because when image becomes more important than truth, truth starts getting ignored. Timocracy doesn't stay stable, because once honour and power are valued, wealth follows. And that leads to oligarchy. Now the system is no longer about honour, it's about money. Power concentrates in the hands of the wealthy, opportunities shrink, and society splits into two. Those who have everything, and those who are slowly being left behind. History shows this pattern clearly. Look at the late Roman Republic. Elite families accumulated massive wealth and influence, while ordinary citizens faced instability and decline. The gap widened, and when the gap widens, something dangerous happens. Resentment. Because people don't just want survival, they want fairness. And when they feel the system is rigged, they stop respecting it. That resentment leads to revolution, and from that revolution emerges democracy. Freedom, equality, voice. At first it feels like justice, like liberation, and in many ways it is, but Plato saw something deeper, something uncomfortable. He believed democracy contains the seeds of its own downfall. Why? Because of excess. Imagine removing all rules from a game. At first it feels freeing, but eventually there's no structure, no direction, no standard. And here's the critical shift. Freedom becomes the highest value, not truth. Not discipline, not long-term thinking, just freedom. And when freedom becomes absolute, people begin to reject anything that limits them. even if it's necessary. Authority weakens, standards dissolve, and leaders, they stop leading, they start entertaining. They tell people what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And this is where things accelerate, because too much freedom creates instability, too many voices create noise, too many choices create confusion, and eventually people become overwhelmed. Think about it psychologically. When your life has no structure, no discipline, no direction, what do you start craving? Control, clarity, certainty. Now scale that up to an entire society, and you begin to see the shift. This is where tyranny emerges, but not the way people expect. Not as an invasion, not as an obvious threat, but as a solution. A strong figure appears, they speak clearly, they promise order, they cut through the chaos, and they say, I will fix this. And people listen, because at that point, they want to. History has repeated this pattern, the fall of the Roman Republic into imperial rule, the instability of the Weimar Republic followed by authoritarian leadership, moments where freedom becomes so unstable that control felt like relief. And that's the key insight. Tyranny is not imposed, it is invited. Plato's progression isn't random, it's driven by changing values. Aristocracy is wisdom, Timocracy is honour, oligarchy is wealth, democracy is freedom, and tyranny is control. Each stage isn't just political, it's psychological. It reflects what people prioritise. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Society doesn't choose its system consciously, it drifts into it based on what people value. So step back and look at the world today. Rising inequality, distrust in institutions, endless noise of opinions. Leaders competing for attention rather than respect. And perhaps most importantly, a growing desire for someone to take control and restore order. So ask yourself honestly, does this feel like a stable democracy or a system under pressure? Because if Plato is right, we're not looking at random events, we're watching a pattern unfold. So let's end with this. Imagine you're inside this cycle, not observing it, living it. You don't get to pause it, you don't get to rewind it, all you have is awareness. So here's the real question. If the cycle begins with individuals losing discipline and ends with society losing freedom, then where does it actually start? Out there or in here? Because maybe Plato's greatest warning wasn't about governments, maybe it was about us. And if that's true, then the future of society isn't decided by systems. It's decided by the standards we choose to live by every single day. And if those standards continue to fall, then tyranny isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow, like, comment and subscribe. And just a quick shout out to our sponsors. Strong Coffee Company, protein-packed coffee for energy and clarity. Use code VANCRUX1 for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com. And then there's More Labs, clinically proven hydration and recovery drinks. Use code VANCRUX1 for 25% off at morelabs.com. And finally, LiQure Gummies, electrolytes and vitamins for hangover prevention. Use code VANCRUX1 for 20% off at liquor.com. That's LiQure.com.